Let me be blunt with you. If you're spending your days worrying about how much more money you can make, there's a good chance you're ignoring the one thing that can destroy everything you already have. I've seen it too many times to count. People don't usually lose their financial future because they were lazy or unintelligent. They lose it because they were careless at the wrong moment. Here's something most people don't want to hear. The older you get, the fewer mistakes you're allowed to make. When you're young, time forgives you. When you're older, time keeps the score. I've lived through multiple market cycles. Booms that felt unstoppable. Crashes that felt like the end of the world. In every single one, the same pattern repeated itself. People were calm right before the trouble. Confidence, certain, and then shocked when things went wrong. Not because the warning signs weren't there, but because they didn't want to see them. Most investors spend their energy asking the wrong question. They ask, how much can I make? I always asked, how much can I lose? That difference may sound small, but it changes everything. I've watched people spend decades saving, investing, sacrificing, doing all the right things, only to undo it all by reaching for a little extra return at the worst possible time, usually late in life. Usually when they told themselves they couldn't afford to be conservative anymore. That's the cruel irony. The moment people feel pressure to take more risk is often the exact moment they should be taking less. If this makes you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is usually where learning begins. Too many people believe investing is about intelligence, about clever ideas, about finding something others don't see. In my experience, investing is far more about behavior, about patience, about humility, about knowing what you don't know and respecting it. I've seen very smart people get wiped out, and I've seen very ordinary people do just fine. The difference wasn't talent. It was risk control. Here's what people rarely admit to themselves. Losses hurt more than gains feel good. Not emotionally, mathematically. A big loss doesn't just set you back. It changes the entire game. It forces you to take risks you wouldn't normally take just to get back to where you started. And that's how temporary problems become permanent damage. Over the years, I stopped trying to impress anyone. I stopped trying to be early, bold, or heroic. I focused on one thing instead: survival. Staying in the game. Making sure that no single event, no matter how bad .cold, knocked me out completely. That mindset didn't come from fear. It came from observation. I learned that markets don't reward optimism the way people think they do. They reward preparation. They reward restraint. They reward people who understand that the future is uncertain and plan accordingly. By the end of this conversation, I want you to see money differently. Not as something to chase, but as something to protect. Because once you understand how fragile wealth really is, you realize something important. Making money is optional. Losing it is not. One of the most dangerous ideas in investing is the belief that risk is obvious. People imagine risk as something loud and dramatic. Falling prices, bad headlines, panic. But real risk rarely looks like that at first. The real risk is quiet. It builds when everything feels fine. The riskiest environments I've ever seen were the calm ones. Periods when markets moved steadily upward, when volatility was low, when people stopped asking hard questions and started assuming tomorrow would look like today. That's when discipline fades. That's when caution feels unnecessary. And that's when mistakes are planted. I learned early on that risk is not volatility. Volatility is noise. Risk is the possibility of permanent loss, the kind you don't recover from, the kind that forces you to change your lifestyle, your plans, your sense of security. I've seen investors confuse the two over and over again. They feared short-term price swings, but ignored leverage. They worried about missing out, but ignored concentration. They obsessed over returns, but never asked what could go wrong if things didn't work out. That's backwards. At some point, I stopped asking whether an investment could make money. I started asking whether it could hurt me, badly, permanently. And if the answer wasn't clear, I passed. People often mistake this for pessimism. It isn't. It's realism. Every investment carries uncertainty. The future doesn't owe us clarity. The question isn't whether something can go wrong, it's whether you can survive if it does. That single question has saved me more times than any clever forecast ever could. Another hard truth people struggle with is this: your ability to recover declines with age. That's not a judgment, it's math. When you're younger, time is an asset. You can wait out mistakes, you can earn more, you can start over. As you get older, time becomes a liability. Mistakes last longer because there's less runway left. I've watched people ignore this reality because it was emotionally inconvenient. They kept playing the same aggressive game that worked when they were younger. But markets don't adjust for your age. They don't care about your plans. They don't slow down because you're close to retirement. That's why I've always believed that the goal changes as life progresses. Early on, growth matters. Later on, durability matters more. The objective shifts from maximizing returns to minimizing regret. If you're nearing retirement and still building a portfolio that only works in good times, you're taking a gamble you may not even realize you're making. A single bad sequence of returns can undo years of discipline. And once that happens, there's no rewind button. What surprised me most over the years wasn't how often markets went wrong, but how often people failed to prepare for that possibility. They assumed intelligence would protect them. It doesn't. They assumed experience would save them. It doesn't. Only structure and discipline do. I stopped trying to predict the future. I focused on building something that could withstand it. That meant accepting lower returns at times, holding more liquidity than felt exciting, passing on opportunities that looked attractive but carried hidden risks. None of that made headlines. None of it felt heroic, but it allowed me to keep showing up year after year. And that's where real wealth comes from, not brilliance, but endurance. Over time, I realized that most financial damage doesn't come from dramatic, once-in-a-lifetime disasters. It comes from a series of small decisions that all lean in the same dangerous direction. A little more risk here, a little more leverage there, a little more confidence because things have been going well. None of these decisions feel reckless on their own. That's why they're so dangerous. I've seen investors tell themselves they were being rational while slowly removing every margin of safety they had. They concentrated their portfolios because diversification felt boring. They borrowed because interest rates were low. They assumed liquidity would always be there because it always had been, until it wasn't. One of the most important ideas I've learned is that safety isn't about avoiding discomfort. It's about preparing for stress. If your plan only works when markets are cooperative, you don't have a plan. You have a hope. Hope is not a strategy. I've also learned that activity is often mistaken for intelligence. People feel the need to do something, especially when uncertainty rises. They trade more, they tweak more, they chase explanations. In many cases, the smartest move is to do less, not more. Doing nothing is emotionally hard. It feels passive. It feels irresponsible. But over my career, inaction has often been the most disciplined decision I could make. Avoiding a bad investment is just as valuable as finding a good one. People rarely appreciate that because losses don't show up on performance reports until they do. Another lesson that took time to fully sink in is this: being early feels exactly like being wrong. When you step back from risk while everyone else is enthusiastic, you look foolish, you sound pessimistic, you feel isolated. But I've learned to accept that discomfort as a cost of protection. The market has a way of rewarding patience very slowly and punishing impatience very quickly. There were plenty of times when caution made me look out of touch, when returns lagged, when others were celebrating gains I chose not to pursue. But I was never trying to win a popularity contest. I was trying to avoid outcomes I couldn't recover from. That meant being honest with myself about what I could and couldn't tolerate. Not just financially, but emotionally. Stress leads to bad decisions. If an investment keeps you awake at night, it's already too big, regardless of what the numbers say. As the years passed, my definition of success changed. It stopped being about how much I could accumulate and started being about how little I could lose. I began measuring progress not by peaks, but by resilience. By how well I could endure difficult periods without being forced into action. The people who survive long enough to benefit from compounding aren't the ones who swing the hardest. They're the ones who avoid being knocked out. Compounding doesn't work if you're not around to experience it. If there's one thing I wish more people understood, it's that wealth is fragile. It feels solid when markets are calm, but it can disappear faster than anyone expects. Respecting that fragility isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Once I accepted that, everything became simpler. Not easier, but clearer. At some point, I stopped thinking about money as a way to prove anything. I wasn't trying to be the smartest person in the room. I wasn't trying to impress clients, colleagues, or strangers. I was trying to make sure that no single mistake could undo a lifetime of discipline. That shift changed how I evaluated everything. I stopped asking whether an opportunity looked exciting. I asked whether it was necessary. I stopped focusing on what could go right and spent more time on what could go wrong. Not in a fearful way, but in a respectful one. The future deserves respect because it's unpredictable. One of the biggest misunderstandings about careful investing is that it means missing out. In reality, it means opting out of unnecessary danger. You don't need every opportunity. You only need the ones that don't put you at risk of ruin. People often underestimate how damaging one bad period can be. A severe loss doesn't just affect numbers on a statement. It affects confidence, judgment, behavior. Once fear takes over, people abandon their plans at exactly the wrong time. That's how temporary declines become permanent outcomes. That's why structure matters more than conviction. A well-built portfolio should protect you from yourself. It should be designed to function when emotions are strongest, not when everything is calm. Over the years, I came to rely on a simple mental checklist. First, I asked whether I could survive the worst-case scenario. Not tolerate it, survive it. Then I asked whether the potential reward was fair compensation for the risk. And finally, I asked whether I could remain patient if the investment didn't work for a long time. If the answer to any of those questions was no, I walked away. This approach doesn't make headlines, it doesn't create exciting stories, but it creates something far more valuable: staying power. The people who build lasting wealth aren't the ones who chase the highest returns. They're the ones who avoid the deepest holes. They understand that once you fall far enough, climbing out may not be possible. As life goes on, the goal becomes simpler, not richer. Simpler. You want fewer things that can go wrong, fewer decisions that require perfect timing, fewer risks that depend on hope. I've always believed that conservatism is misunderstood. It isn't about fear, it's about responsibility. Responsibility to yourself, to your family, to the future version of you who will have fewer options than you have today. If there's one conviction I've earned over a lifetime, it's this: making money is exciting, but keeping it is what changes lives. Security doesn't come from bold predictions. It comes from careful preparation. You don't need to be aggressive to be successful. You need to be thoughtful. You need to be patient. And above all, you need to respect how hard it is to recover once something is lost. That's why I care more about losing money than making it. Because wealth isn't built by taking the biggest risks. It's built by staying in the game long enough for time to do the work. If you value clear thinking over hype, discipline over excitement, and survival over stories, stay with me. There are more lessons worth learning before the market teaches them the hard way.